Hey everybody, this is Charles Rather again. Today I wanted to talk about the top 5 mistakes people make when applying for an E-2 visa. If you've watched some of my other videos, you know I'm a big fan of E-2s. I love them. They're easy. I think a lot of people don't even know they exist. So it's a great way to get to the US relatively quickly. Try it out, live here for a little bit with your family, see how much you like it. And if you do, then you can work with us to take further steps to get your permanent residency, a green card, and ultimately, if you like, citizenship. So what are the top 5 mistakes we most often see? I would say the following. First of all, people don't always necessarily understand they have to trace their funds for an E-2. So the analysis of funds is much easier than with an EB-5. But still, you have to show where the money came from. You sold a house, you got dividends from your business, your parents gave you money. So you've got to kind of detail that, provide bank statements, show the path of funds, provide documentation as to the source. Generally, they don't dig further down than the most immediate level. And what I mean by that is, let's say you sold your apartment. Generally, it's sufficient to just show, hey, here's the sales paperwork, here's the contract, here are the bank statements showing I got the money from the buyer, and generally that's sufficient. If you know anything about EB-5, that's just the tip of the iceberg. For EB-5, you've got to go back and show how you bought the apartment, using what money, when, even if it was 20 years ago, and for that reason, it's a little bit more difficult with EB-5. So with the E-2, path of funds is easier, but you still have to do it. Next mistake, most common mistake, I would say, is regarding making expenditures for the business. So it's not adequate to just transfer the money to the U.S. company and say, here, I got $100,000 in my bank account. I think I'm going to develop some kind of business. When I'm going to do it, what I'm going to spend the money on, we'll see how it goes. That's not how it works. You need to spend the majority of those funds, again, depending how much you're investing. But if we take a baseline case, let's say you invest $100,000, you need to actually spend probably $50,000 to $60,000 prior to filing for your petition, because they want to avoid any kind of fraud. Somebody could easily say, I promise that I will spend this money on my business. And as soon as they get their visa, they just might take the money out, put it in their pocket, and use it to go on vacations. So the government wants to be sure that you're going to spend the money on the business. And the way they show that or ensure that is you spend maybe 50, 60% just prior to filing, and then you have to provide agreements or contracts to show that you're committed to spending the remainder over the course of the next year. So that's a very important concept, and I think clients oftentimes overlook that. The other mistake sometimes people make is that they don't realize they have to get everything ready and basically open up the business, get all the licenses prior to filing for the petition. So some people think, well, I just invest my money. When I get the visa, I'll come to the US, I'll look for the real estate, the property, I'll start doing renovations, I'll buy the equipment. That's not at all how it works. You need to do all that prior to filing. So you need to find the space that you're going to rent. You need to execute a lease agreement at least for 12 months for that space. You need to buy all the equipment or the inventory you need. You need to make all the renovations, fit outs, everything that's required. And you even have to get all the required licenses. So basically you have to get everything ready so that as soon as you come to the US, boom, you can immediately open the doors and start business. Or you can open the business and start operations prior to your arrival if you have some people here on the ground in the US. So people often misunderstand that. And that creates a certain degree of risk, right? Because you are investing, opening, committing to a lease agreement before you even have the visa in hand. So it's a little unnerving sometimes. But again, with experienced counsel and attorney and support, we're more than confident that we can help you arrange everything with a very high likelihood of getting your visa. Other mistake that sometimes people commit or not aware of is that children don't have a work permit under the E-2. So the spouse and the primary investor, they're able to work and get a social. But any children, even if they're over 16 or 18, they're not allowed to work under an E-2. So the child is allowed to stay with the parents under their E-2 status until the child turns 21. But again, they're not allowed to work or get a social while they're in that status of E-2 under their parents. Now, sometimes what we do with older children, when they're, say, 20, 21 or older, we might file an independent or separate application for the children. And in that case, of course, they would get the opportunity to work on their own and get a social. And the final point I wanted to mention is that there's a difference between the duration of the visa for the E-2 and the status. So every country has a specific period for which the E-2 is issued. It could be as short as 90 days or as long as 5 years. Now, that doesn't mean you can live in the U.S. for 5 years straight or only 90 days. It just means how long the visa is valid for. So some people say, like Ukrainians, the visa is only valid for 90 days. That means you need to enter the U.S. within 90 days after you get the visa at the consulate. But once you enter, you can stay here for 2 years, just like anybody else, just like Brits, Canadians, Armenians. You stay here for 2 years, regardless of how long the visa is valid for. Now, at the end of that 2-year period, or in the course of that 2-year period, you can come and go as you please. And then when you leave and then come back, the clock restarts again and you get another 2 years. Now, the main disadvantage for, say, Ukrainians who only get a visa for 90 days is once 90 days passes, which in most cases will, if you enter the U.S., most people stay here at least for 90 days. When you leave, you'll have to go apply for a new visa. Whereas those like Canadians, Brits, Germans, etc., where they get a 5-year visa, they have a full 5 years that they can travel without having to visit the embassy again. So I hope this was a good primer of the 5 mistakes or misunderstandings that people generally have about the E-2. If you're looking at the E-2, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to give you personalized consultation on how to best move forward.